Welcome to my Rewriting RWBY series, where I rewrite RWBY for my own personal taste. I hope you enjoy the series as much as I do. Now on to part 3 of the Rewriting RWBY series. Professor Port yelled as he fired his weapon at a Grimm. "Rise and shine, everyone! We have a fight on our hands." Dozens of Grimm had already made it past the broken wall as Yang, Weiss, Blake, Jaune, Pyrrha, Nora, and Ren jumped up, grabbing their weapons, and started to fight the Grimm. Yang was the first one up as she punched an Ursa Grimm a few times, killing it, and then she did the same to the next one. After, she turned towards the broken wall and started firing her weapons at the Grimm trying to make it inside the city. Blake used her semblance to dodge a Beowulf Grimm and then killed it with her weapon. She turned towards a few of the other Beowulf Grimm and killed them with swiftness as she joined Yang in firing her weapon at the Grimm trying to go through the broken wall. Weiss used her glyphs to repel herself towards a few Beowulf Grimm, killing them with her sword. She then started firing dust bullets from her sword at Grimm that were trying to get in through the broken wall. Ren fired bullets rapidly at two Ursa Grimm that just destroyed a wall of one of the ruined buildings. The Ursas turned towards him and ran directly at him. Ren dodged one of the Ursas and used his weapon Stormflower to kill the Ursa. As he did this, Nora smashed the other Ursa with her hammer, killing it as it landed inside the building the Ursas were trying to destroy moments before. Ren, you need to hide the people's emotions before they attract more Grimm. Nora, fire some grenades at the Grimm trying to come in through the hole in the wall. Jaune said as he was looking around trying to figure out what he should do as he was terrified of fighting the Grimm. Pyrrha used her semblance to kill the rest of the Grimm that made it into the city, crushing them with ruined cars and metal beams that they cleaned up yesterday. Pyrrha, can you use your semblance to plug that hole in the wall? Jaune asked, still very frightened. Pyrrha nodded yes as she used her semblance to throw the ruined cars and metal beams at the hole. Just as she did, the others stopped firing their weapons through the hole in the wall. Pyrrha used her semblance to hold the metal objects in place, though she was struggling. The Grimm are pushing back. I have to stay focused so they don't break through again, Pyrrha said. How long do you think you can hold it? Jaune asked. As long as I have to, but it will be hard for me to fight like this, Pyrrha said as she stabilized herself, focusing on the hole in the wall she just filled. The metal started to bend a bit around other pieces of metal in the wall itself. Pyrrha was trying to attach the pieces of metal to the wall, but this level of control over so much metal at once was difficult for her and required her entire focus, especially with the Grimm pounding at the metal. Good job, Jaune and Pyrrha, Professor Port said as he jumped on the wall and killed a Griffon Grimm that was flying over the wall. Jaune, I will leave you and Pyrrha here to make sure that hole stays plugged. Jaune, you will need to cover Pyrrha, Professor Port said. Pyrrha nodded yes and focused on keeping the hole in the wall plugged. Jaune, however, looked nervous and frightened as he took a poor fighting stance in front of Pyrrha. Ren, keep hiding the emotions of the people from the Grimm, Professor Port said. Ren nodded yes, as he continued taking a fighting stance just in case the Grimm broke through. RWBY, Yang, Weiss, Blake, and Nora, you are with me. We need to, Professor Port said as he was cut off by Yang. Where's RWBY? Yang yelled, freaking out as she looked around for her little sister. Where is she? Where did she go? Jim said as he ran out of the building the citizens were in. Where's Cherry? Easy, Jim. What happened? Professor Port said as he shot another Griffon Grimm a few times, killing it. We were together when the Grimm were attacking, and then some girl, shrouded in shadows wearing a Grimm mask, tried to grab Cherry's camera, but was unable to get it due to the camera's strap. I tried to punch her, but she took me down easily, and then I told Cherry to run. I did my best to hold her off, but she was too fast, and she ran after Cherry. And now, I don't know where she is, Jim said. Blake, out of all of us, you're the best at tracking. Can you help Jim find Cherry and whoever this girl was that tried to take the little girl's camera? Professor Port said as he tried to fight a few Griffon Grimm. What about RWBY? Yang said as she jumped onto the wall and punched a Griffon Grimm while her eyes glowed red and a fiery aura escaped her. RWBY is a huntress. She is more than capable of taking care of herself. Right now, we need to protect those who can't, Professor Port said as Yang looked down with her red, angry eyes. I assure you, after the Grimm attack is dealt with, we'll find your sister, Professor Port said as he continued to fight the Grimm. Okay, now, Yang and Weiss with me. Nora, you stay on the wall and give us support with those grenades of yours. You will also be in position to fall back in case the others need help. Professor Port says he jumped down to the other side of the wall where hundreds of Grimm were trying to break through the wall. Yang and Weiss followed as Nora jumped onto the wall and fired her grenades at the Grimm that were running or flying towards the wall. Blake went over to Jim and asked, "Do you know what direction she went?" Jim looked at Blake with sad but angry eyes as he said, "I don't know. I think that way." He pointed towards the ruined homes. Blake started to run that way as he saw someone moving quickly in the direction Jim pointed. Jim followed Blake as he yelled, "Wait, I'm coming too. I promised my best friend, Cherry's father, that I would take care of her right before he died. I won't let anything happen to that little girl." Blake nodded her head yes as she continued to the location where she saw someone. She was able to see at night due to her being a cat faunus. Meanwhile, Ruby dodged Torchwich's shot using her semblance, but she was unable to get close and even had to fall back as Torchwich kept shooting fire dust bullets one after the other. The fire even started to catch the grass and trees on fire around them. "Why keep running, Red? I thought you wanted to play the hero, and heroes don't run," Torchwich said as the flames around them grew stronger. Ruby used her semblance to dodge shot after shot until she finally saw an opening and rushed Torchwich. Ruby attacked Torchwich with her scythe, but Torchwich blocked it with his cane as he said, "That's it, Red. Be the hero." Ruby used her semblance to get behind Torchwich, but he was one step ahead of her and fired another shot at where Ruby was going. The ground exploded at Ruby's feet, and she was launched backwards. "Those tricks won't work on me, Red. This isn't the first time I dealt with someone with powers like yours," Torchwich said as he fired another shot at Ruby. Ruby used her semblance to fall back, and she noticed the trees and grass all around Torchwich were on fire. "That's it. If I can't beat him, then maybe I can have him beat himself, or the fire will beat him, or something like that," Ruby thought as she ran around Torchwich as he continued to shoot fire dust bullets at her. The trees started to blaze in fire, and a few large branches started to fall all around Torchwich. He had to dodge them, which gave Ruby a chance to use her sniper rifle to fire at Torchwich. The bullet hit Torchwich as a very large branch landed on top of him. Fire all around him burned in a fiery inferno. "I may have overdid it a bit, or he overdid it, or something. I just hope I didn't kill him," Ruby thought. However, out of the flames like a phoenix rising from the ashes stood a figure that shot at Ruby and hit her, causing her aura to flicker. "Using my own fire against me. I have to admit, Red, you have style," Torchwich says as he approached Ruby. "But just like your speed, I have a power of my own. Survival. You see, as heroes die, I will always survive," Torchwich said as his aura flickered, as he pointed his cane at Ruby, hoping to finish her off. He shot, but at the last second, Ruby used what little aura she had left and dodged the shots with her semblance, and then ran off towards the broken wall. "I should have woke them. I was a fool. I need to get them now," Ruby thought as her aura depleted completely as she continued to run away from Torchwich. "It seems you're not the hero, Red. Running away from a hero's fate?" Torchwich yelled as he looked on. Torchwich then texted Neil a message. "Red is headed your way. She won't have much fight left in her. Finish her off, Neil, but make sure you stay hidden while you do it." Meanwhile, Blake spotted Ilia trying to reach Cherry, who was behind some heavy debris. "I think I see them. This way," Blake said as she ran towards Ilia, while Jim followed even though he could not see them. Blake attacked Ilia with her weapon, Gramble Shroud, which flung through the air and hit Ilia in the back as she was trying to grab Cherry's camera that was just out of reach to grab. Ilia jumped back and faced Blake as she said, "Why did you have to be on this mission?" "Ilia," Blake said as she took a fighting stance. "You know her?" Jim asked as he ran to Cherry, hugging her. "The bad lady's after my camera," Cherry said as she stared at Ilia with dark-like eyes, while Jim stood in front of Cherry trying to protect her. Ilia looked shocked seeing a human protecting a faunus as she turned to Blake and said, "Blake, listen, I don't want to hurt you or the girl. Just give me the camera and I'll go." "I must have taken pictures you bad people don't want others to see," Cherry said as she took a picture of Ilia. Blake looked at Ilia as she said, "That's it, isn't it? She took pictures that he doesn't want to get out. It's not just Adam. Blake, please, if you ever cared for us, you'll give me that camera," Ilia pleaded with Blake. "It's the White Fang, isn't it? You're one of them," Jim said as he stared at Ilia with hatred in his eyes as he protected Cherry. Blake, please, Ilia said. Blake looked at Ilia and then back to Jim and Cherry. Jim was in front of Cherry, trying his best to protect her in case Ilia attacked. Cherry was scared, but there was determination in her eyes to do the right thing as she protected her camera. What should I do? If I give Ilia the camera, everyone will be safe, and the White Fang will be free from whatever they did. But Adam can't go free after what he has done. This little girl was attacked just because she took some pictures the White Fang didn't want getting out. This means Adam has changed the White Fang for the worse, and Jim was right all along. Blake looked back at Ilia with dart-like eyes as she said, "You're not getting that camera, Ilia. Whatever is on there, Adam and the White Fang will have to deal with the consequences of what they have done," Blake said. "That's it then. You made up your mind," Ilia said, a bit taken back by what Blake just said. "I have, and I hope you see it for yourself as well," Blake said as she pointed her weapon at Ilia. "You know they will never accept you. Once your friends find out, they will abandon you, and you will run away just like you always do," Ilia said. "Maybe you're right, but I think it's about time I make right for what I've done," Blake said, keeping her eyes on Ilia. Ilia, with tears in her eyes, said, "Then you give me no choice." "You always have a choice," Blake said. "Maybe you do, but I don't," Ilia said as she attacked Blake with her lightning lash. Lightning and sparks flew as Blake dodged. Jim grabbed Cherry and ran to take cover from the fight. Blake swung her weapon at Ilia, which she dodged, and then countered, hitting Blake directly. However, Blake's form disappeared in a fiery explosion that sent Ilia back. Blake reappeared above and fired shots from her weapon at Ilia, which she blocked with her lash. Blake landed on the opposite side of Ilia, where Ilia attacked Blake with her lightning lash, but Blake's shadow clone took the hit. As she appeared closer to Ilia and attacked her with her blade, Ilia backed up, dodging Blake's attack, as Ilia attacked Blake with her lash. Again, Blake dodged and got even closer this time. Ilia was just barely able to redirect Blake's blade with her lash as she tried to back up again, but there was a wall in her way. Ilia tried to use her lightning lash to attack Blake and jumped on the other side of her, but Blake used her shadow clone to take the hit and managed to kick Ilia against the wall. "It doesn't have to be this way," Blake said as she pinned Ilia to the wall. "You can leave the White Fang like I did. The White Fang is the Faunus' only hope. At one time you knew that," Ilia said as she phased through the wall behind her, using her semblance to escape Blake. Blake ran to the other side of the wall, but there was no sign of Ilia, so she ran back to Jim and Cherry. "Are you two okay?" Blake asked. "We are, thanks to you," Jim said. "I'm truly sorry for fighting you when we first met. I was a fool." "We both were," Blake said. "Now let's get you two back to safety." "What about the pictures I took? Don't you want them?" Cherry asked as she handed Blake her camera. Blake looked at the camera, wondering what pictures the girl could have taken that made Adam send Ilia to get them. "I could look now. I could even make sure no one else sees them. Whatever is on them must really be bad for the White Fang, and maybe if I... No, I can't. I know what Adam has done. I've seen it with my own two eyes. If the White Fang followed his path, then I'll let the pictures show the truth," Blake thought. "I think you should hold on to the camera for now. You should give it to Professor Port once the Grimm are taken care of," Blake said as she smiled at the little Faunus girl. "Will do," Cherry said with a thumbs up and a smile as her wolf ears perked up. "Before we go back, I have to know, were you a member of the White Fang?" Jim asked. Blake looked down as she said, "I was, but I left when the White Fang started to go down a dark path." "But Jim, she is one of the good ones now," Cherry said. "She is, and that is clear to me now. But I have one more question. Do your friends know about it?" Jim asked. Blake looked down as she said, "No, none of them know." Jim did not press Blake any more, as he was glad that she saved Cherry. Blake, however, wondered if she should tell her friends everything. She wondered what they would think of her when they found out. She wondered if she would run away like she always did in the past. The three of them headed back to the others as Blake stayed alert, looking for any signs of Ilia. Ilia, however, was crying down an alleyway as her aura flickered. Her skin turned blue, mimicking her sadness. She looked at her own reflection in a puddle as tears flowed down her face. "I can't believe I just fought the person that took me in when I had no one. Blake and her parents became my family after my parents were..." Ilia thought as the tears kept coming. "The worst part is, she didn't hold back. I was like her sister, and she was doing all she could to fight me and protect that little girl, and even protect that human." That human. Why was he so keen on protecting Aphanis? Could Blake be right? No, not after what they did. Ilia thought as she regained her composure. I failed, and I have to report back. Ilia thought as she disappeared into the night, heading outside the wall to their hiding place. Meanwhile, Nora was doing her best, shooting all the Grimms she could see from the top of the wall with her grenade launcher. Professor Port, Yang, and Weiss were on the ground doing their best to clear as many Grimm as they could, but they kept coming. Ren was now helping Nora with the flying Grimm, taking down as many as he could. However, this led to attracting more Grimm, as the people's emotions were no longer being hidden. Pierre was struggling to keep the hole in the wall plugged, as there seemed to be a lot of large Grimm pushing against it. What is taking Professor Port and the others so long? They should have cleared the Grimm by now, Jaune said as he raised his shield, keeping his eyes on the flying Grimm that Red and Nora were dealing with. My aura is getting low, but I can keep this going for a while if I have to, Pierre said as she focused on keeping the hole in the wall plugged. We may have to, Jaune said as a Griffon Grimm swooped down and knocked Jaune down to the ground. On the ground, Jaune gripped his shield as the Griffon Grimm tried to peck at him, but kept hitting the shield. While this was happening, a great force pushed hard against the metal that was plugging the hole in the wall, causing Pierre to put more focus into holding it into place. Pierre looked at the broken wall as he saw a few Grimm arms starting to appear from the sides, and then to Jaune, who was trying to prevent the Griffon Grimm from pecking him, though he was pinned to the ground. Pierre took one last look at the wall and used everything she had to push the metal out on the other side of the broken wall. This caused many of the Grimm that were pushing to be killed, and the rest flew to the ground. There was one very large alpha Beowulf Grimm that was only pushed back a bit. It roared as Pyrrha slammed the metal into it a few times, killing the alpha. She then looked back at Jaune and pierced the Grimm with her spear, killing it. However, Pyrrha used up too much of her aura, plugging the hole, and her aura started to flicker. Jaune, are you okay? Pyrrha asked as she helped him up. Jaune looked down at the ground and said, I was useless. Don't say that, Jaune. You're not useless. You are, Pyrrha said as she was cut off by a swarm of Grimm breaching the wall through the hole. Pyrrha, you have to stop those Grimm. I will only get in the way, Jaune said. But Jaune, Pyrrha said, no, this is not the time, Pyrrha. You are the best huntress at school, and that is what we need right now. You need to stop worrying about me and kill those Grimm, Jaune said. Pyrrha nodded yes, but her eyes revealed she was concerned. She then took her spear and shield and charged at the Grimm that were swarming into the city. Jaune watched as Pyrrha flawlessly took down Grimm after Grimm without even using her semblance. If only I could give her my aura, then I would be useful for something, Jaune thought as he heard the people in the building screaming. Jaune rushed into the building, and there the people were panicking as a Griffon Grimm was about to attack them. The Griffon looked up at the people that were screaming as Jaune threw a rock at it and yelled, Over here, you ugly thing! The Griffon turned towards Jaune and rushed him as he took cover behind a few shelves. It pecked at him but could not reach him as he motioned to the other people to leave, take cover, and remain silent. Come on, Jaune, think. You have to think of a way out of this, Jaune thought as he looked around for anything that could help him. Jaune saw Herman making sure everyone left the building. Herman looked at Jaune, knowing Jaune was in trouble, so after everyone was safe, he threw a rock at the Grimm and yelled at it to get its attention. No! Old man, don't! Jaune said as he tried to attack the Grimm, but he was too late. The Griffon Grimm attacked Herman with his beak, sending him to the ground, badly hurt. Jaune's aura lit up a bit as he swung his sword at the Grimm, cutting it as the Grimm was pecking at Herman's body. The Griffon Grimm howled in pain as Jaune used this chance to attack the Grimm again, but the Griffon Grimm backed away and landed on the shelves that Jaune hid behind before. Jaune had tears forming in his eyes as he thought, I have to remain calm and figure out how to beat this thing. The Grimm swooped down at Jaune, but due to its injury did not fly straight. Instead, it flew left of its target, which in this case was Jaune. Jaune dodged to the side that the Grimm leaned away from. Even with the Griffon Grimm injured and flying to the left, Jaune was barely able to dodge it. The Griffon Grimm flew onto more shelves that landed onto it. It screamed in pain as it struggled to free itself from the shelves that were on top of it. That might work, Jaune thought. The Grimm took sight of Jaune and flew at him, which Jaune was able to dodge as he was starting to see the patterns of when the Griffon Grimm was going to attack. The Grimm bashed into more shelves, causing itself more pain. It did this a few more times until Jaune could tell it was really hurt and tired. However, Jaune was also tired at this point. Okay, now or never. Right when the Griffon does that motion with its wing, it will attack, Jaune said. The Grimm did the motion that Jaune was thinking about, and at that moment Jaune leaned away and attacked with his sword at nothing. However, just like that, the Grimm was right where Jaune was attacking, and Jaune cut off the head of the Griffon Grimm. Jaune collapsed to the ground exhausted as he watched the dead Grimm turn into black smoke. I can't believe I actually did that. Still, Jaune thought as he looked over at Herman, I hope I can save him. In fact, if it wasn't for him, I would have never been able to defeat that Grimm. I really shouldn't be here. Jaune ran over to Herman, who was dying. Jaune tried to put pressure on his large wound, but Herman, with all his strength, said, No, listen to me. You and your friends have to protect them. Please. Herman breathed his last as Jaune looked on with horror in his eyes as tears poured down his face for the old man. It's my fault the old man died. Anyone else could have handled that Grimm with no issue. I shouldn't be here. I should have never joined Beacon. If I hadn't, this old man might still be alive. Jaune thought as he covered Herman's body with a sheet. Jaune then headed to the other citizens to see if they were okay. When he got there, he saw that Blake had just arrived with Jim and Cherry. What happened, Jaune? Is the Grimm dead? Blake asked. Jaune looked down as he said, It is. But so is Herman. Jaune could barely hold back the tears. On hearing that Herman was dead, the citizens rushed in and saw Herman's body covered with a sheet. I wouldn't look. It's pretty bad, Jaune said, but they would not listen to him, and they screamed at the sight. Jim, can I see? Cherry asked. No, it's not a sight you should see, Jim said. But I need to get a picture for Professor Port, Cherry said. I'll take it, Jim said as Cherry handed Jim her camera. Jim took a picture and then handed the camera back to Cherry as he said, Promise me you won't look at that picture, okay? I promise, Cherry said. A fight was happening on the front side of the building as they could hear Red and Nora fighting two King Taijitu Grimm. Blake rushed outside to help them as Jaune slowly followed, not sure if he would be of any help. The two King Taijutsu merged into one, and when this happened, both Ren and Nora stared at it, petrified. Nora snapped out of it first as she shook Ren and yelled, Ren, we have to move! The merged King Taijutsu was closing in as Ren's thoughts went to the time the Vale Grimm first merged from the Horse and Imp Grimm that were attacking his home village. Nora pushed Ren and herself to the ground as the King Daijutsu Grimm attacked, missing them both. Ren was brought back as he looked at Nora, who was on top of him, and said, Nora, I'm sorry. Nora, with flushed cheeks, looked at Ren, their faces almost touching, as she said, Ren, I know when those Grimm merged, it must have brought back memories, but we need you. I need you, Ren. Nora, Ren said, and then saw that the King Taijutsu Grimm was going to crush them. Ren put his arm around Nora and rode both of them out of the way as they got to their feet, still holding each other. They then took a fighting stance, getting ready to fight the very large, merged King Taijutsu Grimm. Blake joined them as they fought the merged King Taijutsu. However, it was clear that they were going to lose that fight. Jaune looked on, trying to figure out any way he could help. Think, Jaune. That Grimm has to have a weakness somewhere, Jaune thought as Ren, Nora, and Blake continued to fight the giant Grimm. Meanwhile, Professor Port, Yang, and Weiss were in constant battle with the Grimm outside the walls. They just kept coming, and Yang and Weiss were beginning to get tired. We have to keep going until we get reinforcements. I alerted both Vale and Beacon at the start of the Grimm attack. They should be here any minute, Professor Port said as he swung his axe into an Alpha Ursa, killing it. As they were fighting the Grimm, Yang noticed someone running towards them in the distance. Is that RWBY? Yang yelled as she started running towards RWBY. Yang, wait, Weiss said as she ran after Yang. Yang ran towards RWBY full force, killing any Grimm that got in her way. Her eyes were red and yellow aura flames were being emitted from her body. Weiss was close behind, catching up with her. RWBY, I'm coming, Yang yelled. In the distance, Yang and Weiss saw RWBY fighting with some girl, and it was clear RWBY was losing. RWBY was on her knees, completely defeated as the girl was going to finish her off. For Weiss, this brought back memories of her father kneeling in front of a Grimm that took over a giant knight armor that was going to finish him off. Weiss looked at Yang and used her glyphs with lightning dust to increase Yang's speed, while also sending her ice glyphs in front of Yang to Ruby to further increase Yang's speed. Yang used Weiss's glyphs in the full might of her semblance and ran as fast as she could while yelling as she did. Once she got close enough, she punched the figure that was about to finish Ruby off, but the figure shattered like a mirror. Ruby was on the ground, but she was not that injured, as Yang hugged her and asked, "Ruby, are you okay?" "I think so," Ruby said. "But I don't know who that girl was. She had yellow hair and was using a sword that was also a shield." "Don't worry about that now. All that matters is that you're safe," Yang said. "What about the city? It looks like an army of Grimm," Ruby said. "The Grimm attacked, but reinforcements should be arriving soon," Yang said, and as she did, a few planes fired missiles at the Grimm outside the city, as a few others landed and cleared the Grimm that made it inside. However, the merged Grimm Taijutsu Grimm escaped underground, covering its hole as it dug deep. The soldiers could not pursue, but saw that it headed outside of the city. The Grimm were cleared as Ruby, Yang, and Weiss headed back to the others. While they did, Neil was watching them hiding in the trees. She used her semblance to disguise herself with yellow hair, blue eyes, normal clothes, and even her umbrella was a sword and shield. She went back to normal as she retreated into the trees as she texted Torchwich. "Red got away, and Vale's army is clearing up the Grimm." Ruby, Yang, and Weiss made it back to where everyone was, just inside the city's walls. After they finished clearing the Grimm, all the planes left except for one. Instead, it landed inside the walls of the city, and a few soldiers left the plane. "Well, I'll be damned if it isn't my old friend Sam," Professor Port said. "Well, if it isn't Peter, my old college roommate," General Samuel Johnson said. "What took you so long? The Grimm almost overtook us," Professor Port said. "Not my call. Let's just say the console is not giving this broken wall issue the time it needs. Also, there were more bombings on the other side of the city again," General Johnson said. "That lines up," Professor Port said. "Can you give me the details quickly before the console calls me back?" General Johnson said. Professor Port went over the details and the others added their parts. Blake also mentioned that the White Fang wanted Cherry's camera for some reason, though she did not mention that it was Ilia. "Why would they go through so much trouble for a camera?" General Johnson asked. "Would you mind if I take a look, young girl?" "I promised Blake that I would only give it to Professor Port, sir," Cherry said with a stern but friendly look. "Can I take a look then?" Professor Port said, as Cherry handed him the camera. Professor Port and General Johnson looked at all the pictures on the camera. "Well, that explains a lot," General Johnson said. "Peter, can you send these pictures to the console and Professor Osmond at once?" "I'm sending them now," Professor Port said. "Hopefully this sheds some light into the broken wall issue and the bombing issue, as I think they are both connected," General Johnson said. "Connected? But what would bombings on the other side of the city have to do with a Grimm attack?" Nora asked, puzzled. "I don't know yet, but hopefully we can figure it out," General Johnson said. "For now I have to go back to the site of the bombings, as that is where the console wants me." "But sir, you saw how bad it got. Even if there are bombings elsewhere, shouldn't you at least deploy a few troops here?" Jaune asked. "To be honest, simply by being here, I could get court-martialed." The consul was clear that their focus was the bombings. "I don't agree with it, but I can only do so much. I hope Professor Osmond can knock some sense into the rest of the consul," General Johnson said, and then left on the last plane, leaving Professor Port, Team RWBY, and Team Juniper alone with the citizens. Okay, well, that's it for Rewriting RWBY Part 3. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you in the next one. Bye.